What's up, my producer friends? It's David with another monsterproductions.com, and today we're going to be learning the basics of music theory. So a more classical approach to teaching music theory would be to basically teach you how to read and write music. And I don't think that's really that important or relates to music production. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach with this video. I want to approach music theory from the point of view of how it relates to producing music. And so I'm going to do my best to break this down in a way that makes sense to that. And so what I'm going to do with this video is break this down into three elements, which I think make up music production and just music in general. And that is rhythm, melody, and harmony. So we'll get into that in just a second. I do want to mention that there are other free resources out there where you guys can learn a lot more about music theory, especially the stuff that I'm kind of skimming over or skipping over in this tutorial. I think musictheory.net is a really great free resource which you guys can use. I'll be sure to leave a link in the description of this video if you guys want to check that out. They have tons of lessons going over the stuff that I'm going to skip over, and they also have tons of free training exercises. I especially like the ear training ones. I think that can be really helpful for producers. So check that out if you're interested. As always, I am going to leave timestamps in the description of this video as well as in the comments. So if you guys kind of know some of this stuff and want to skip around for whatever reason, feel free to do that. And without further ado, let's jump into the video. All right, so before we get into the video, there is one thing that I want to address, and that is that I see this all the time where people who are brand new to music production are constantly asking whether or not they actually need to learn music theory, whether or not it's important for music production. And this is a question that is really difficult to answer, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it just really depends on where you are musically. So there are people who are just naturally have a gift for music, and then there are people who naturally don't. And if you're one of the people who naturally don't, that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it's going to be a lot harder to get there. You're going to have a lot more work having to train your ear, learning music theory, understanding the fundamental aspects of how this stuff works, understanding rhythm, understanding melody, understanding harmony, than someone who just naturally has a gift for it. Now, having said that, everyone is going to benefit from understanding at least the basics of music theory because it can help you come up with better melodies, better chord progressions, and the list goes on and on and on. So short answer, yes, music theory is important, and that's why I made this video. Let's jump into it. All right, so this stuff should be pretty basic, but essentially rhythm is made up of sounds and silences. We call sounds notes, and we call silences rests. So this is kind of approaching into the territory of reading and writing music that I don't want to get into, but I do want to just sort of give a brief explanation of what's going on here because I think understanding it can help you come up with better melodies. So we have ways of writing notes, which can make it so that you can hold out a note for a longer period of time or a shorter period of time. And the same goes for rests as well. And so it may be kind of intuitive to get in here and plotting out melodies by evenly spacing everything apart, which may sound something like this. But it might be a better idea to actually add some longer notes, maybe add some more space in there, which could maybe make a melody sound a little bit more like this. So I know neither one of those melodies really sound that great by themselves, but hopefully at least you get an illustration of what I'm talking about. All right, so beat is also very similar to rhythm. They're slightly different. I think a lot of people kind of get them confused, but basically the beat is the pulse of the rhythm of the track. So for example, when you're listening to a song and you're nodding your head along to it or you're tapping your foot, that's along with the beat or the pulse of the track. In the case of house music, the beat is every time the kick hits with that 4 to the floor. Okay, so we can actually organize the rhythm of our track or our song into measures, which are these lines that you guys see right here. And these are called bars or measures. And depending on the time signature of our track, it determines how many beats go into each one of these measures. I'm not even really going to touch on this subject because almost 100% of the time when it comes to electronic music, pop music, hip hop, anything you're going to be producing is going to be in 4/4 time signature or 4/4 meter. And that just means that you're going to get 4 beats for every measure as you kind of see what's going on here. Now we also have tempo, and this is really going to affect the overall mood or feeling of the track depending on where we want our tempo. So for instance, right now I have this set at 128, which is a very common house tempo, and we kind of heard how that sounded. But if we were to take this same drum beat and move it down to, let's say, 95 BPM, it's going to have a completely different vibe. All right, so melody is just simply the tune of the song. It's the part of the song that if you get it right, people are going to get it stuck in their heads and be singing it over and over again. So this is definitely the part of theory where I think a lot of up-and-coming producers kind of struggle with, or at least want to understand what elements of music theory will help them out come up with better melodies. So I'll definitely do another video on melodies in the future, but for now let's move on and sort of define some different terms. A tone is just a musical sound. Pitch is a tone that vibrates at a very specific frequency. And so when we actually tune the pitch to the specific frequency, then we can assign letter names to it, which we call the musical alphabet. So the musical alphabet starts on A and goes to G, and then it restarts. So it only has 7 letters. All right, so let's take a look at our keyboard. So this is an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we're back to A. And so what I actually did was I just played a scale. And so pitches are actually organized into groups of notes, which are called scales. So in FL Studio, if you want to switch it so that you can actually see all these notes here, click this little arrow button, go down to View, and then go down to where it says Key Labels, and click All Notes. And this is going to show you all the notes in our entire piano roll. Now the way that DAWs do it is they label everything by octave with starting with 0. So this first octave is 0, second octave is 1, 2, 3, and so on and so on. All right, so there are 3 main types of scales which I want to cover in this video. There's major, minor, and chromatic. And there's actually 3 different types of minor scales. So this is definitely a topic that I could go into a lot more depth in the future. So let me know in the comments down below if you guys are interested in that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the keyboard and I'll show you what these different scales are. All right, so I want to show you the C major scale, but before we do that, I want to show you what a chromatic scale is, because a chromatic scale uses all half steps, and hopefully this will help like clear up what half steps and whole steps are. So it doesn't matter what note we start on since we're doing the chromatic scale, but let's just start on A. So this is A here, and we go up a half step, that would be A sharp. Go up another half step, that would be B, then C sharp, D, half step, half step, half step, half step, half step, half step, half step. So we just went up a series of half steps. That's the chromatic scale. And all the other scales that you're going to be playing are going to have to do with a series of whole steps and half steps. Now you guys probably heard me say the term sharp. I am going to sort of address that a little bit later in the video, so don't worry about that for now. All right, so the first scale that you're almost always going to learn how to play is the C major scale. And the reason for this is because on the keyboard, it's the easiest scale to learn because there are no sharps and flats and it's all white keys. So if we start on C, which is this note here, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's our C major scale. And as you can probably hear, it sounds pretty happy. Everyone is jumping up and down while I play the C major scale. But when I play the C minor scale, it's going to be the opposite. Everyone's going to start crying. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, let's look at how you can determine what makes up a major scale. So when we go back to our original note here, which is C, we play the note, and then we go up a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, a half step. All right, so luckily I have this pen and paper that I can write this down for you. So it's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So that's the major scale. All right, so now let's play our natural minor. So the easiest way for us to do this is to go back to our C and then go down 2 notes. So now we're back to A, and we're going to just play all white keys again. So hit the A, go up a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So that's a natural minor scale or relative minor. Okay, so our natural minor scale is a whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, then a whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, then a whole step. So depending on what note we start on determines the key of our scale. So we can start on any one of these notes. It doesn't have to be a white key either. We can do a black key. And as long as we're following the series of whole steps and half steps that I just showed you, then you will be playing the correct scale. Now the cool thing about FL Studio is it does have helpers in the piano roll as well. So if we click this button here and go down to helpers, we can go to scale highlighting, and we can basically choose any one of these scales or modes, and then the key that we're in and it's basically going to highlight in light blue what notes go within that particular scale. So it's a pretty cool little thing you guys can use to help you if you're new to these things. All right, so we also have intervals, and intervals are the difference in pitch between two sounds. So for example, if we go back to our C major scale, the difference between the C and the D, that's a second. This would be a third, fourth, fifth, and so on. So the cool thing about intervals is that different intervals actually evoke different types of emotion. And so when you understand this, it's actually, you can take that and use it to create better melodies or more interesting melodies or melodies that pull at people's emotions a certain way. All right, so harmony is when multiple pitches are playing at the same time. And the most common use of harmony is chords. Another common use of harmony that you'll probably see in music production would be like if you had a melody and then you had a counter melody on top of it, creating harmony. All right, so let's talk about chords. This is where music theory can start to get really tricky because there are tons and tons of different combinations of pitches or notes that you can play to create all sorts of different chords and all sorts of different harmonies. However, for this particular video, we're going to keep things pretty simple. I'm going to show you the two basic major and minor chords, or triads. Triad just means that you're playing three notes or three pitches simultaneously at the same time. So let's take a look at our keyboard and I'll show you some examples. All right, so let's take a look at our C major chord first. So this is what our C major chord looks like right here, or our C major triad. And you may notice that we're starting on our root note, or the first degree of the scale. This is also often called the tonic. So if we go up two notes, this is the third note in the scale. So this is the second note that we play in our triad. And then you go up two more notes, and that would be the dominant, or the fifth of the scale. So we have 1, 3, 5. This is our basic major chord or triad, and it's very happy, jubilant sounding. It's a great chord, but we can also invert this chord. So we don't have to start on the root note. We don't have to start on the 1. We could start on the 3. This would be our first inversion of this chord. So you would still play the 3, the 5, and then you play the 1 up here. So this is our first inversion of our C major chord. You could also do the second inversion, which starts on the 5 and then plays the C and then the third up there as well. So this is the 5th, the 1st, and the 3rd, or the G, C, E. So I hope that makes sense. We have different inversions. We have our basic C major chord, first inversion, second inversion. All right, so let's talk about our C minor chord. So our C minor chord is almost identical to our C major chord. The only difference is this middle note right here. So once again, I'll play our C major chord. If we want to make it minor, all we have to do is lower this middle note 1/2 step. So now it sounds angry, dark, sad. So in order to know the difference between a major and a minor chord, if you can't necessarily tell just by listening to it, we can do a similar exercise to what we did with our scale, where we counted whole steps and half steps. So for our C minor chord, or for our minor chord in general, if we're doing a minor triad, if you start on our root note, which in this case is C, and you walk up 1/2 step, 2/2 step, 3/2 step. So minor, you go up 3/2 steps, and then you go up half step, half step, half step, half step. So you go 3/2 steps and then 4/2 steps for a minor chord. And for a major chord, you go up 4/2 steps and then you go up another 3/2 steps. So it'd be start on this C note, go up 1/2 step, 2/2 step, 3/2 step, 4/2 step. So that's the middle note. And then 1/2 step, 2/2 step, 3/2 step. So that's our major chord. Now, just like our major chord, we can also invert this chord. So this is our C minor triad. Can go. So that's our first and second inversion. So earlier when I went from my C major chord to my C minor chord, I basically lowered the third by 1/2 step. So our C major chord is C, E, G, And when we lowered it, what we're doing is we're going C, E flat, G. And so sharps and flats are a tool that we can use to either raise or lower the pitch of a particular note by a half step. So sharps raise the pitch by a half step and flats lower the pitch by a half step. So it's pretty cool. All right, so a chord progression is just a series of chords. So for example, something like this. And when we add a chord progression along with a melody and along with our rhythm, that's when we actually start cooking up some music. And that's also where I want to end today's video. So I know I kept things pretty simple. This is all very fundamental, hopefully easy to understand stuff. Hope you learned a little something, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you liked it, please go ahead, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell notification. That's going to let you know anytime I release videos in the future. So this has been a pretty heavily requested topic, and I had to do sort of like an intro into music theory before I could do any more advanced videos. So now that I've done this video, I am going to be doing more like in-depth music theory tutorials in the future. So if you have a specific subject that you want me to make a video on, go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you think this video would be helpful to any of your producer friends, please go ahead and hit the share button and share that with them. It's going to help them out, and it's going to help us continue to grow this channel. So I appreciate you guys for doing that, and I will see you in the next video.